Hello and welcome to the Gold Newsletter. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the JR Mining guy over on X, and together with Brian London, I'm your host of the Gold Newsletter YouTube channel. Really appreciate you joining us. We'll be joined by Claudia Tornquist in a few short seconds. She's president and CEO over at Kodiak Copper, and we'll be introducing this company to you today. We'll run through the highlights of the company. What are they up to? It's an interesting copper explorer, by the way. Where's the project located? British Columbia. Really nice and close to Vancouver. I've had the pleasure of visiting in the past. And we'll talk about the plans for the year, of course. The company's just closed a financing, and we'll talk with Claudia about the use of proceeds and, of course, some of the upcoming catalysts. So lots to go through here in the next 25-30 minutes with her. But before I switch over to my guest, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out reaching a wider audience and tremendously appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. Now, without much further ado, Claudia, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Kai. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Claudia, I really appreciate you coming on. And let's start with a bit of a company introduction. 30, 60 seconds. Who's Kodiak Copper?
Yep. Kodiak is, as you said, a copper exploration company. It was founded and is chaired by Chris Taylor of Great Bear fame. And we are focused on the MPD Copper Porphyry Project in southern British Columbia, in an existing mining district, where we have consolidated a large land package with lots of historic work and have now drilled for 6 years. And this year is a very important one for us, 2025, because we will come out with the maiden resource for this project. First results already in Q2 and more results later in the year. And that is a very, very important catalyst and milestone for our company, because really it brings together 6 years of work that we did on the project.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate the overview here, Claudia. And before we dive into any of the details and what you've done for the last 6 years here, run us a bit through the capital structure, options outstanding, warrants, and of course, cash.
Yep. Well, one thing to highlight is we are a tightly held company. Even after 6 years of big drill programs and over $40 million raised, we only have 76 million shares outstanding. And that's pre our financing. We just closed a financing and are now fully funded for the year. So we'll have some 6 million in the treasury and we'll be motoring off with that. Our biggest shareholder, worth mentioning, we have now two biggest shareholders. One is Teck Resources, who has been a shareholder ever since we made our original discovery, a very supportive shareholder. And just in this financing, we had a prominent European resource fund investing for 9.9% as well. So now also have a financial strategic shareholder, which I'm very pleased about.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's interesting times. Things are moving ahead. Run us a bit, warrants, options, anything outstanding, anything we should worry about in terms of overhang or so?
We have some warrants outstanding and typical option program like most juniors have, but nothing really that I would particularly highlight that would stand out.
Yeah, no worries. I'd just like to get everybody on the same level so we have a good understanding of where the company is at right now, of course. Mm-hmm. Really interesting overview. And if maybe before we go into the details of the project and everything, you're part of the discovery group. And I have to ask, what does that mean for Kodiak Copper? How important is that? And how supportive is that group for you?
Well, it's a fantastic group. It's been founded by John Robbins many years ago and has a lot of successes to its name, over $2.6 billion of exits in the group, so returns to shareholders. And what Discovery is essentially just a loose alliance of independent public companies. We all work out of the same office, and there is just a lot of sharing of expertise, of industry contacts, of technical know-how, and so on. So it's a really good group of people. And what's also very important to me, what I think is a real big benefit of being part of the group, is that it just gives a lot of credibility. and particularly retail investors appreciate that. The Discovery Group has been around for many years, very successful group, and the companies in the group, that just is then a seal of approval that those are solid companies, well run, with projects with merit, projects with merit, and so on. And yeah, that gives a lot of investors confidence, and that credibility is also an important benefit of being part of Discovery.
Absolutely, yeah, and it saves a lot of money when you're, especially coming through COVID and different other challenges in our sector. It makes a lot of sense. The synergies are just really, really impactful for still a junior exploration company, right? Absolutely. Claudia, let's take a step back here. Like, tell us a bit more about the history of the project, the MPD project. Tell us a bit location. Of course, I mentioned it. It's not far from Vancouver, but run us a bit through the history, location of the project, and what have you done the last 6 years?
Yep. Well, location is a very important point to highlight. We are in an existing mining district in southern British Columbia. From Vancouver, it's a 3 hours drive on the highway. And there are two big copper mines north and south of us, just 20 and 30 or 40 kilometers away from us, respectively, and multiple other mines, historic mines, other exploration projects. And that is a huge, big advantage in terms of costs, because all the infrastructure is there. So that makes our exploration very cost effective, and our exploration dollars go a long way. And also importantly, that will be much more an advantage going forward in the future, because in an existing mining district, to get another mine permitted and built is a whole lot easier and more cost effective than doing so in a remote location where many other projects are located. So big advantage. And you asked about history. That's also an important point to highlight. Kodiak has consolidated multiple projects that had lots and lots of historic works, like millions of dollars of historic work spent on those claims. And in total, we had between 60 and 70,000 meters of historic drilling in total on a variety of different small projects historically that we all put together. And that gave us an important advantage right from the start, because we benefited, of course, enormously from this historic work, but also by putting it together and consolidating the package, we were able to create critical mass. None of those historic projects really had enough size to make it work, but the fact that we were able to put them together, that really got us there. And we now have a large multi-centered porphyry system. And this year we will, as I said, come out with a resource that will really demonstrate the size and the grade of what we have here at MPD.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. That was a good historical overview, Claudia. Of course, we got to talk about 2025 now. Like, what is the plan? Before you come out with a resource, what other work still needs to be done before we get to that point? Is there anything missing still?
Well, our first results from the resource are actually coming quite soon in the second quarter, in April, May time. And that will be on 4 different zones. In total, our resource work encompasses 7 zones, 7 different mineralized zones. And the 4 for which we'll come up with the resource estimate first, we just take the work we have, all the drilling, all the data, and it goes right into a resource estimate. And that'll be available in the second quarter, so soon. Looking forward to that milestone. Then for the remaining 3 zones, we want to do and have to do a little bit more drilling over the summer, some confirmation drilling, some infill drilling. And that will then flow into the resource modeling, and those zones then will come out with the resource in the second half of the year. So by end of the year, we will have the complete maiden resource. And what's important to keep in mind is that it will be a real maiden resource in the true sense of the word, in that when we bring it out, we know already that it will become much bigger than what it initially is, because for Most of the mineralized zones, most of those 7 zones, we only have drilled a handful of holes. It's historic drilling and a couple of hour holes, and those zones are still wide open. And one of the zones that we are including in the resource modeling is a zone called Ketchen. That's a zone we only that is on a claim package that we only acquired last year in September, and we haven't even done a single drill hole on that. But the historic data is really good, and we can just take it and do the resource modeling. But there, we know already where we want to drill, where there are obvious areas to expand and extend mineralization. So yeah, very important point to highlight that there will be lots of upside to that resource. Plus, on the property, there are still multiple untested targets that we also want to drill. So there's still lots of room for growth of the resource, and then also just new discovery.
No, fantastic. I do have to ask the follow-up question though, Claudia. Is like, why are you breaking it up in 2? Why not just wait till like the fall or so to put out one comprehensive resource?
That's really just driven by the fact that we have 7 individual zones. Some of them already good to go. And I think it's just fair to our shareholders that we actually disclose that information when we have it, when we know what the resource will be there. And I think even though it's only a partial resource, it will give a good sense of just the size of what we have there. And yeah, that's why we come out with it early. And then those zones where we need a little bit more drilling, they will be then in the second half of the year.
No, fair enough. I just had to ask. So, really interesting. In terms of metallurgy, have you done any metallurgy will be incorporated in that resource, or how is it being considered?
We just announced a couple of weeks ago that we have commenced a metallurgical program, and those results will also come out in Q2 and will then flow into the resource. So yes, is the answer to your question.
No, fantastic. Because then the resource model makes a lot more sense. Instead of just 100% recovery assumptions, we can actually have some real recovery assumptions. Makes a big difference, right? You touched on that you will be doing some more drilling, of course. Run us a bit through the plans. Have you just raised money? Run us a bit through the use of proceeds. How are you going to allocate that capital?
Yeah, well, we're just in the process of planning the drill program. It will be quite a substantial program, somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 meters of drilling. And we'll announce the details in the coming weeks and months. We typically start drilling in late spring or in early summer, and then drill all the way through the summer and into late in the year. So we'll do something similar this year. And it will be an exciting drill program on multiple zones, and all in all, a very catalyst and news-rich year, because like in previous years, we will have drill results, but we also have metallurgical results. We obviously have the resource as well, which is the major catalyst. So lots of news flow for our shareholders.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, lots going on there. Have you given the market any guidance of what the resource will look like in terms of grade? What are sort of the expectations? Anything we can hang our hat on?
Well, what we've always said is that we will come out with the resource as and when we believe we can come up with a resource that does the size potential of the project justice. Our vision from the start was that MPD has the potential to become a major mine. And that's why we didn't go the route that some other juniors do, to just drill a little bit, come up with a small resource, drill a little bit more, add to the resource, that sort of incremental approach. But we've always said we will drill until we come out with a resource that shows the size potential. So the fact that we are coming out with a resource now, that tells you that we are confident that we can do so, that it will be a substantial resource. And just in terms of order of magnitude, I think good comparable are other companies, copper explorers in Northern America that already have a resource and are progressing successfully. And what I would say, just on a high level, to be successful with a porphyry, you need many hundreds of millions of tons of mineralizations, and the grades you typically see in North America are somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4% copper equivalent. And so that's certainly the sort of ballpark we're aiming for. And I'm looking forward to our resource estimate, and I'm confident that we have something that really does the project justice. And I think it's a very important milestone and a really good chance that we'll have it will give us an opportunity to close the valuation gap to some of our more advanced peers. The Kodiak's market cap at this time is around about 30 million, and companies that are moving forward with successful resources, for example, North Isle or Faraday, which are peers of ours, but further down the road, they have valuations of more than 100 million, 150 million, and so on. And so big gap. And I think this year for Kodiak is a year to really close some of that gap. And I think we have a very good shot at that.
Yeah, Claudia, I've got to ask you a bit more of a challenging question here, maybe a bit cheeky as well. You mentioned, of course, Chris Taylor is your chairman and of Great Bear fame. And one thing that made Great Bear special that keeps coming up in conversation everywhere, Great Bear never put out a resource before they got bought. Okay, so the challenging and cheeky question here, Claudia, is like, what with Chris involved, why is he opting for a resource at Kodiak but didn't opt for one at Great Bear? I know I'm comparing apples and oranges, gold and copper project a bit, but just curious.
Well, it's in many ways a very similar strategy that we're pursuing with Kodiak than what Great Bear did. Essentially, drill until there is a resource that really demonstrates the size potential of the project. So Great Bear never got around to actually, they were working on the resource, but got taken out before. But on the face of it, the strategy that we're pursuing with Kodiak is very similar to what Chris did with Great Bear. And yeah, the resource is an important milestone because what happened to Great Bear is very atypical, that a company gets taken out before a resource. What you more typically see in the market is that a resource is a catalyst then for M&A activity to start in earnest. And for companies then getting taken out, I always cite GT Gold as an example. They are also a peer company of ours, copper porphyry exploration in British Columbia. They came out with a resource and subsequently got taken out for around about $500 million valuation. And that's also why a resource is important, because really it is very often then a catalyst for M&A and then value obviously for shareholders.
Absolutely. It means like I'm not as familiar with copper exploration like perhaps with gold. So gold always seems a bit easier to calculate and wrap your head around. So it makes a lot of sense, and I agree. Claudia, you just raised $6 million. So I do have to ask though, copper is a critical mineral. How much support, especially financially and maybe on the regulatory side as well, are you seeing from the Canadian government and to a lesser degree from the US government before changes in the White House were made?
Well, I can certainly say that thinking back during my time in the resource industry, this time stands out in that there is an incredible amount of political will and political support for the resources industry, and in particular for critical minerals and domestic exploration and production of critical minerals. You can, in Canada and in many other countries, let's look across the spectrum, every party highlights we need domestic critical minerals. And obviously that's politicians talking, but from our own experience, we can certainly see efforts on the ground to streamline permitting, make it more efficient. Our first permit, when we started working, took us 5 months, and our last permit last year, when we permitted for individual drill pads, that took us couple of weeks, less than a month, and so certainly much quicker. So yeah, I would say it's a very positive political climate for minerals exploration and politicians and also wider society. People just really recognize the importance of those minerals for the future, for electrification, etc.
But no funding guarantees or anything from the government. Have there been any conversations? I know it's a bit early because you haven't press released anything, so I don't want to put you in the spot here. But I'm just curious because maybe from personal experience, I talked to the German general consul in Vancouver, and he said, "Kai, show us critical minerals projects. We're curious." And of course, in Germany, we have the KfW and export finance and things like that, which are government backed, obviously. So I'm curious if you've been approached, if you've been having conversations. I know you're still a few years from production, of course, but companies need to get to that point where they can even make a production decision. And that all costs money these days, right? Nothing's for free. So has there been any even financial mention or financial support mentioned by governments?
Well, what we have in Canada, of course, is the flow-through regime as a start. That's been in place for many years, which is a really, really valuable tool for juniors to raise money. And there's now an extra critical minerals credit, so that really lowers our cost of capital. There are also a number of different sort of grant schemes that the government has put in place to support the industry. Many of them are for more advanced projects, but some are also for earlier stage. And we've actually just had at the recent PDAC conference some conversations with government officials about grants that sort of are research type grants for metallurgy and things like that. So we're certainly looking into that.
Yeah, fantastic. No, Claudia, we talked about the MPD project the whole time, and we're really excited about the catalysts coming out. We'll sum them up at the end of the conversation. But before hitting the record button, we briefly talked about a project, a secondary project you have in Arizona. Catch us up on the Mojave project real quick as well.
Yeah, well, that's a copper porphyry project as well, in a very good neighborhood. In that respect, quite similar to MPD. It's also an existing mining area in Arizona, which is copper country. And it's an exploration project that's drill ready. And we actually acquired it around the same time as MPD. And originally intended to drill it, but then made the big discovery right at the start at MPD. So Mojave has always been our secondary project. And we've now made the decision to look for a partner there. So have companies look at potential earn-ins, etc. So there might be an announcement on that coming at some point. Certainly we're looking into options. It's an interesting project, but our effort is focused 100% on MPD.
Which makes a lot of sense. I was having a conversation with Michael Gentili earlier today, and we were talking about Canadian exchange rate going into the U.S. With the Canadian dollar being just so much weaker than the U.S. dollar these days. So the dollar goes way further in Canada. And as you said, you got the mineral credit, the MTEC credit, plus the charity flow-through and the flow-through tax exemptions there as well. So it makes a lot of sense. Claudia, wonderful conversation. But before I let you go, we do need to summarize the catalysts for the next 3 months here, upcoming news events. We're always greedy as investors. You just closed the financing. What's next?
Well, the next big catalyst is certainly the resource announcement. That's an important one. And as I said, that will be in late April, early May, around that time frame. Before that, we'll have some metallurgy results, which should be interesting as well. And then around the same time, we'll also get going with our drill program. So expect an announcement about that too. And then from the summer onwards, we'll get drill results throughout summer, autumn, until late into the year and potentially next year. And then, of course, in the second half of the year, then the second part of our resource, which again will be an important milestone. So very news-rich and catalyst-rich year for our shareholders.
Fantastic. Claudia, what a wonderful overview and introduction. Really looking forward to the resource coming out. We'll have you back on at that time to run us through what it means, how big is it, where's the room for improvement. As you said, there's still so much to do on the project. You've barely scratched the surface. So we'll catch up then. So thank you so much. And in the meantime, everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you watching. If you haven't done so, hit that like and subscribe button. Helps us out tremendously, reach a wider investor base. And we just thank you for it. So thank you so much for that. Leave a comment down below as well. What do you think about MPD? What do you think about Kodiak Copper? We read all the comments, so let us know, and we'll revert back to the companies. Even if you leave some questions, we'll include those in the next conversation. So thank you so much, and we'll be back with lots more here on the Gold Newsletter.